All right, everybody. Just want to get a affirmative that everybody can hear me. Hello, Tim. Okay, perfect. Thanks, everybody. All right, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Sorry for a couple of technical difficulties there. Today we're going to talk about using webinars for lead generation and a couple of ideas and considerations. I am Suzanne Carowin here at HighRoad Solution. I am our Chief Marketing Officer, and we've been doing webinars for, I feel personally, I've been probably doing webinars for a goodness, 15 years. Always using them as part of a lead generation strategy, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that is and why they're actually hot again. And I think what's really interesting is that it's an old technology that's taking on a lot of new importance because of the fact of it coming from no longer the sense of just doing education or as a format in which we can be able to communicate with our members or let's say some of our other constituents, but really it's taking on a new spin to it because of growth, and I should say the need for growth. So while webinars, let's say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, were generally seen as something that you would do maybe from a sponsorship standpoint, but you would use it usually as a revenue driver for your membership. You might have a member price, a non-member price. And what's interesting is while those things have generally kind of stayed and maybe stayed static, and some organizations have said, you know, that's not working anymore. They've tried the webinar program. They got rid of the webinar program. Webinars have gotten a lot more also less uptight with this formal kind of, you know, introduction, and people are using tools like Zoom now. Zoom just got $100 million, if you guys weren't aware, this week. And they're using these technologies because they're so quick to market. You can get the thoughts out there. And also, more importantly, as organizations are trying to continue to find their voice and have more authentic ways of communicating, it allows the real people behind a brand to shine through. And so what's happening is that as organizations, and in our case, especially associations, are realizing, hey, we got to grow. This is a new thing. We got to go get in front of new people that we didn't know before, and we need to figure out how we're going to get new email addresses so we can email them. We're going to have to figure out, how can I craft a message that's going to appeal to a 25-year-old, 35-year-old, 45, 55, 65, 75, might be spanning, you know, 5, 6 decades of people in the workforce. When we are trying to do that, we realize that webinars are such a quick go-to-market type of tool in our toolbox, and that they're kind of infinitely malleable and have a bunch of great characteristics that we can capitalize on, that webinars are very much coming back in style from the lead generation or growth perspective. And that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit more about why webinars are hot. We're going to talk about the metrics we get and continue to talk about the metrics we get and continue to talk about the metrics we get and why the data is so important. And that's one of the benefits of webinars, is that we can get such great data out of them about behavior. And they really offer so much more than, you know, even than the content and being able to capture the content. We're going to talk a little about promoting webinars for lead gen, right? Which is maybe a little bit different than what some of you are out there used to doing. Might add some new pieces there to your portfolio of how you actually do your typical marketing. And then we're going to go through a quick success story from one of our favorite clients. So webinars, as I said, are hot, hot, hot again. And that's primarily for lead gen. And what's interesting is this is now taking a model and saying, hey, let's not focus in on per se putting out content that has to be paid for. This is exactly of saying, let's use webinars from a free perspective and use webinar as a format or a channel, I guess you could say it is, but let's say format, as a format for content marketing that we can capitalize on and really add into, and often cases in today's world, our marketing automation flows. So what are some of the elements that make webinars just truly fantastic for lead generation? And there's 5 in particular I've come up with. There's many more that we can go into. There's a gazillion programs out there about what makes for great webinar programs, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I caution you, make sure that they're updated for kind of today's look and feel and today's feeling of authenticity and what it means now to kind of be in a YouTube kind of a live stream, Facebook Live type of format. Like I said, a lot of the things have kind of changed a little bit. It's come down. It used to be a big barrier for entry, especially small associations. They would feel like, well, we don't have a studio, we don't have a stage, we can't afford to have somebody moderate it. All these things have really changed with depending on who you're targeting and who your target market is, of course, but much of that has kind of relaxed, and it allows you to now to use, again, technologies like Zoom, GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, things like that. Join Me, to be able to put on these kind of quick webinars that we can capture content and also have some amount of maybe interaction, but more importantly, to get to the data. And marketers want the data, right? So we want to get the data because it allows us to understand who to target, what to target on, what's important, etc. And we'll talk about those in turn. So 5 elements here that make webinars great. We're going to talk about one after the other. But again, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just the start of a list. So one of the elements that really makes webinars great in today's world of lead gen is the fact that it's got this kind of flavor, and this is very much in style with the today's buyer that we're talking about. So today's consumer, our consumer who is snarky, who is skeptical, who believes their friend over perhaps a review that they're reading, who really needs to understand what's in it for me, who understands that they're in control, who has a attention span of less than 4 seconds, right? Goldfish are blowing us by with our attention and focus. The consumer of today that we're all talking about, the multi-device consumer, the no attention span squirrel consumer, that consumer in today's world has a try before you buy kind of mentality. And so they want to be able to taste what you're going to offer. This idea that I'm just going to say, provide me with $59 for a non-member webinar fee, and then you get this great content, is just not going to cut it for many a consumer in today's world. Because why? YouTube exists, right? There's a million alternatives to where they can get maybe that value and that education. So we're really now competing for the thought leadership game. And it's no longer about necessarily, do you have the dollars to get to the information, right? For many years, associations had the education and the networking that no one else could offer. But the only way you got to play was you had to pay. So you had to pay my membership dollars in order to join a community and find those people with the information and then like-mindedness so you could have that community. Well, those barriers and those kind of parameters are oftentimes non-existent. They're oftentimes now, I can go and do this, I can find a free community, I can have my LinkedIn group, I can do all of that myself. So I'm constantly having to come back to my snarky, no attention span, why not go for freemium, why pay if I can get it from X, Y, and Z? And we're trying to say why it is that you should really be a part of, let's say, our membership organization, or why your company should be part of our trade organization, right? And we're constantly trying to explain by virtue of delivering the value to them and letting them be the judge of it, if you're worth it. So it's no longer kind of a game of being like sly and advertising, and if we send the right email and we make it look a certain way, that we're going to be able to get this person to pay us the money, and then we may or may not deliver the value. We have to come in and audition and make the cut and give them basically the free show before they're going to say, yes, this is what we want to do with you. And that's kind of this idea about I'm taste testing. So webinars are a great way for people who are not members, who have never been a customer, who maybe have been like maybe seeing your name one time, don't have a lot of awareness of you, just getting to know you, to start to say, maybe this is something that's worth it. Maybe there's something that's worth it. And it allows you to do that by, again, giving the consumer, right? The consumer, and they're not cutting you a break just because you're a nonprofit. They're not cutting you a break just because you're an association. No one's cutting. They're expecting you to have the same kind of level of service and quality and look and feel and understand them just as much as the other brands out there. But it's allowing you to have a personal dialogue, if you will, allowing you in a webinar format to say, hey, look, here's what I'm about. Okay, here's the type of expertise we have to offer. Here's what we can do for you. Here's what we're doing for other people. And we're sharing. We're sharing freely, right? You know why? Because if you're legitimate and you've got that knowledge, that well does not run dry. And so you have to believe in the brand of your association. You have to really believe that you're never going to run out of new education to create. You're never going to run out of ideas for how to make networking meaningful to certain people. You're never going to run out of your value proposition, right? And so if you understand that about your brand, if you understand that about what you really stand for as your mission, the well will never run dry. So you are free to give and give and give from a standpoint of letting people experience you, experience your legitimacy. And the more you can do that, what it says is the more authentic you are, the more legitimate and steadfast the brand that you've been able to maybe weather hundreds of years, let's say, for certain associations. And also it allows the user to be able to try to do a fit, a goodness of fit. The webinar is allowing them to get information, hear the speaker, understand perhaps the cadence, the speed at which the velocity, the level, and they're constantly making an assessment of, is this a good fit for me? Now, this is fundamentally different than trying to hard sell them and get them to believe and adopt into and pay you before they've had an opportunity to really decide that. Now, that's interesting. That gives one pause for many an organization. That means that we have to really, again, have a lot of trust in our brand, have a lot of trust in our material for what we stand for, etc. And so when we come out and it also opens us up to being vulnerable, because we have to understand not everyone is going to be a good fit. And not everyone is going to fit with what we're offering. And not everyone is going to want to partake in our goods and services that we have to offer as an association. And what that does is it fundamentally changes the game. If I take that approach, what I'm doing is I'm putting all of these kinds of glasses of wine out there, saying, go ahead, taste test, find the one that appeals to you, find what resonates and goes to you that you want, and you are adopting in to me. You're adopting the wine. You get to choose which wine that you want to go ahead and have the full glass of. And it's perfectly okay whatever way you decide to go. Now, for an organization, many organizations, that's a different approach. They've been thinking about it as, if I just sell hard enough, they're going to say yes. If I just send the 10th email this month, they're going to say yes. If I just keep telling them about the certification, the conference, the product that I'm going to put out there that we just released, the new research report, if I just hammer them with enough offers or enough discounts, these people, we're going to wear them down and they're going to say yes, okay? And it might happen, but the probability is not so good. And what happens if you do that is it's very hard to retain. It's very hard because you haven't allowed them to opt in. In this situation where you're attracting and they are deciding, the consumer is making an educated decision from alternatives that are out there, when they make the decision, you know that they've opted into you, right? You know that. You have an extra bit of loyalty already baked in because they chose you. You didn't kind of hoodwink them in, or you got them in there and you're worried, did they just go to the conference because I rolled in membership and it was a discount and they just wanted the discount? You're not wondering that. You don't have any of that. And what it does for the consumer is it increases the brand trust, right? You've set an expectation. Now, if you don't maintain that, of course, there's some problems with that. But it's yours to lose, right? The probability is you're off to a rocking good start, and that if you can deliver on that, and if it delights them, it gives them more than they thought about, well, my goodness, there's your keys to word of mouth marketing. And we know today's consumer values peer review more so than a brand telling you, we're great, we're great, we're great. Okay, so you can keep saying, you know, we're the only organization that has X, Y, and Z, and you can keep telling people, or you can just deliver the value and assume that the user is smart and that the user is going to figure it out, and the user will come to you, and the people that do come to you are attracted and come to you and say, yes, I want to be part of your association, that they are already self-selecting in to being more engaged, to having greater word of mouth, right? And probably have a greater propensity for volunteerism and for further purchase. This whole kind of thing of the try before you buy helps to decrease buyer's remorse. So now they don't have something that kicks into most consumers when we do pass money over to someone else, our hard-earned money, and we say, well, here's our $399 for membership. Now they have already experienced and they've already had a participatory event that they freely gave and they did and they completed. So they don't have as much of that, you know, what did I get for my $399 when it comes time to renew? Like I saw a couple of emails and I didn't have anything. They already have the memory that they did participate and the experience was fulfilling, right? So this idea of having a webinar to be equivalent of like a wine tasting, right? Being able to, whatever you want to say, a cheese tasting in the Whole Foods aisle, whatever the case might be, being able to try the product, try the experience in the association case is something that webinars, maybe even a webinar series, allows the users to be able to do, right? And so then you want to start saying, well, what can I do within my webinar? You know, because again, you don't want to get on a webinar and say, here's 5 reasons you should join us. Here's the value proposition. You know, here's what you'll get if you join us in this association. Instead, what you're really doing is, again, allowing them to experience it. So what's better than coming from someone else's mouth? So that's where you have your expert speaker, you have your testimonials, they're telling the story, etc. And they're saying, hi, this is the personal story and my testament to what this association means, right? And for me, here's what the association did. Whatever the case might be, could be a current topic. Look, we put together this free webinar series to help you talk about, the 5 new regulations you need to know in this industry to help you be a better you this year. Whatever the case might be, you can play with the topics. So think of it this way. You're always going to have a wine tasting or a cheese tasting or a chocolate tasting or fill in the blank for what you want to do. But you get to control, as the organization, what you're putting out there. And each time I put out a different kind of idea or a topic of a webinar to try, I'm getting a different sample back about who's interested in that flavor. And that will help me do what? Much better segmentation of my email. So then it doesn't allow me, I can actually get smarter about who I'm talking to, and I can start to collect these topics and understand what's appealing to these individual groups. And webinars have a very unique ability to do this. They're a great kind of taste testing way to do it, and I can play with different topics and hot topics to understand how I can, what are the areas of interest of this community, how I can group different people who are like-minded together and get them to maybe interact, maybe invite them to kind of a meetup or invite them to a conference and then already kind of pre-bundle them. But you can see I can start to put together a path towards my intended goal, whatever it might be, membership, event registration, etc. And I can start with webinars being one of those first types of interaction points that I can really capture behavior, right? And that's why it's one of the best things about webinars is kind of this try before you buy kind of a piece of it. All right, let's move on. So a second aspect of webinars that make them super hot from a lead generation standpoint is that it really represents a true value exchange. And it's something that is extremely important that you understand in digital, is that there has to be a way in the world of digital to grow new email addresses. And email addresses in digital, as you've heard a million people say, are the driver's license of the digital world. So an email address allows me to go from mass market, kind of public, public proposition out there to saying, in Twitter, in Facebook, in LinkedIn, we're going to have this webinar, banner ads, etc. We're going to have this webinar to say, okay, now you have actually, unknown, anonymous user, you have actually come to some sort of site, landing page, form, however you want to think of it, and you filled out a registration form. So some human on the other side of digital has actually taken the time to enter in their whatever pieces of information that I'm requiring to get from them in order for me to give them admission to this webinar. And that ability, that value exchange of your personal data for my personal content starts the bond of trust. Right there, I moved from mass market public communication to the most intimate channel of communication there is in digital, which is through email, right? And email on my mobile phone is even probably the closest to my heart, if you will, right? It's me and my email inbox. Nobody else can see that and see what you're saying. And I, the brand, have an opportunity to respect the user who just provided a very sacred piece of information about them, the email address. And the younger in generations that you're trying to target, the more valuable and sacred that email address is, right? So it's not seen as like, oh, let's just buy a bunch of email addresses and blast them with email and hope something happens from that. That's seen as something that would be taboo to do, that's something that many of us have done in the past, but it's taboo now. It's just not what you do. It's just not what you do, right? It's like writing an email in all capital letters and having no idea that that is interpreted as you're yelling at someone, okay? So we need to understand and start to respect that the email address is the most personal of exchanges, and it allows us as hard and as email is, because it's not a web browser, we have no standards in these email clients, and most of us are not taught any of this stuff in university or in college or on the job. We just have always known that email's there and it works for us. But as hard as it is to understand the mechanics of it and to make it really work well, and it's frustrating, it's also so fabulously wonderful because I can serve up a completely personalized one-to-one email, one-to-one communication between the brand and maybe even somebody who represents the face of the brand to this individual who is opted in to wanting to come to my webinar on a particular topic, day, and place. And they could be doing it on demand, but they have said, I want your content, I want you, if you will, on this date and time, and I want to be able to consume it in this way, okay? And so that a little value exchange is the first kind of step for us to, again, establish trust and for us to start this personalized dialogue that hopefully we can nurture into a long-term relationship. And if not, we can find out very quickly. Think of it as it's like our first time of sitting down and having a cup of coffee together and finding out. It's like a meet and greet, right? So we want to find out if you're the right fit for us, we as the brand, just as much as we want that at this first time individual to figure out if they want us. And each is valuable. And I think it's really important as we move more and more into marketing automation and into the digital world, that associations really have to get secure with understanding having people not opt into you, having people opt out of your communications is just as an important piece of information and data point for you as them opting in. Do we want everyone to like us? Sure we do. Is that the probability? No way, right? But what is worse than anything in digital is not knowing, having no data. And if we can look at it that way, that all data tells us something, all data gives us an opportunity to learn and put an understanding around this human, then we have a different view of data altogether, right? And at the end of the day, our mission, or the way that most organizations are doing well now, is to be user-centric. So don't I want to respect the user if they say, I don't want your email? Of course. I want to know that about them. I want to treat them in the way that they're telling me they want to be treated, right? And if we don't have a match there, then we're not going to have a good relationship, right? And maybe we need to kind of say there's other fish in the sea, and we need to come from a place of fulfillment and say we need to go find some other fish that are going to be, you know, like-minded to us. They're going to be in our school of fish. They're going to be the same, okay? And of course, each organization's brand needs to understand and decide for itself, you know, what the level of that is. What's the level of diversity? What's the level of inclusivity? When do they draw the line? You know, who are the people, what's the persona, and that's where personas come in, of who we want to attract, and what's the personas of, it's okay if they go by the wayside, maybe there's another organization that better fits their needs, right? It's letting go of, I'm going to be all things to all people. And if I just discount enough, I can be volume. And it's moving into a world, instead of quantity, it's moving into a world of quality. Of we're going to have an organization of people who are opting into us, who have chosen us, and are willingly saying, I want to have a relationship with you. And webinars can be one of the first points, again, think of the words that I just said, to take an anonymous user, is how it's always kind of called in the world of marketing automation, a lot of times in digital, and you're trying to go from anonymous users, people we don't know at all, to actually receiving, by them granting and opting in and providing you permission to their email address and allowing you to continue to build a relationship, a lot of times, again, in a win-win capacity, right? And taking their preferences into account. So webinars provide that great way of really understanding a lot of the fundamentals of digital kind of transformation and moving your business to being user-centric, and this idea, the concept of having a value exchange. And that value exchange, by the way, should happen every time we have an interaction between the brand and the user. That would be ideal. That would be ideal. So, so we would be thinking about, instead of, again, that's why that blast email goes by the wayside, because we would be thinking, each time we're about to send out an email, have I picked the people that this message is appropriate for, that would be interested, that have I explained to them why they should care if they didn't know instantly that they would care, right? Am I respecting the fact that they told me this is when they wanted to receive email, or they don't want to receive this, or they want it on Tuesdays, or what have you? Have I taken all of these data points into consideration, and every step of the way I have this great value exchange? And that's why so many associations are really adopting personalization initiatives. And we saw that really starting in a frenzy in last year, in 2016. And we really see people really now investing and saying, how do we have this personalized experience the whole way through, you know, throughout our relationship with them when it's digital? You know, when we're talking about primarily having a communication pathway with them that's largely based on digital or not having actual human interaction. And webinars, again, great way to bring that kind of to pass. Now, the third piece that without a doubt marketers love, and anybody in the finance department would love, and everybody can agree on, is the metrics. Because, you know, how you interpret the metrics, well, that might be up for debate. But the fact that metrics actually exist is something that is, you know, is amazing. And there's so many metrics that happen within webinars because they are a multifaceted campaign. So webinars, if you think about it, you might put out a webinar and you create a page and you have a form in there, some sort of registration, and then we're going to have to promote it, which we talked about before. Most of the time you're going to promote it through multiple different channels, and you will want to know which channel worked best, and then you will be able to have interactions with people once they registered, probably through email, maybe through text message, maybe through mail. whatever might work. And you're able to have those pieces, and then people show up to an event, whether it's live or on demand, but then they're able to actually watch it. So they actually have to hit and interact with a play button. They might stop it, they might come back, they might leave. All of these things we know. So all of the digital kind of behind the scenes of all those different pieces of technology are tracking all of those different little aspects about a webinar, and it's allowing us to, again, create this comprehensive profile about how engaged is the user. How engaged is the user in the topic, maybe in the format, how many times do they come back with that, to look at it. And all of these start to give us more pieces or data points to start to try to formulate the fundamental questions of webinars, which is, why did you come to this? What made you do this, and what are you hoping to gain from it? And one of the nice things about webinars is they do offer such a long list of ways to measure. And of course, if you're selling them, you're going to be able to know revenue and things like that. Because a webinar is topic-based, I can also then ask questions that get to the heart of what I really want to know, which is, was this valuable? Was this valuable for your time? Right? And I can ask additional questions about these users. Who are these people that come to these webinars? They come every week and they stay 58 minutes and they watch it 3 times. Like, what are they doing this for, right? So webinars have they're like a little petri dish where we can really put a topic in and we can watch and find out who's attracted to that, and we can start to fundamentally question what is making it, what's causing the interest, right? And why are they doing that? And then what else could we do? If we do this, will they be interested? If we did something else, would they be interested? Do they have friends like them who are also interested? And any of the questions I'm saying allows us to get into a forward-focused, predictive model, which is where we want to go. That's the whole purpose of digital, is for us to start to predict the behaviors of individuals and understand and sense and respond before they make an action so that we're prepared. So we can use webinars as a way to kind of temperature test, gauge the response level, perhaps of a particular topic before we create an entire conference around it, right? We might want to put something out there to find out, we're going to put out this particularly hot topic and we're going to promote it only through Twitter. And that's going to tell us something about the people on Twitter, and then whether or not maybe that is a good way for us to promote other types of conferences. Should we spend big money on Twitter, let's say for our annual conference? But it allows us a test case and different ways that we can measure, because it provides so many different kinds of points of measurement, right? And we can all agree that the more data we have, the better it is. And a lot of people say, well, let's just keep going with opens and click-through rates, and that's all we need, because that's as much as we can handle. But the problem with email open and click-through rates is it's not predictive. It doesn't give you the next piece, which is, what do you do now? And what did they go to? That's the next piece. And webinars actually are more, you want to use that too, but it allows you to get a little bit more of a comprehensive understanding of a snap in time of what people were interested in and how they interacted with you. And it gives a nice, complete kind of picture that you can study and come up with a lot of, either answer some of your hypotheses or formulate new ones that you can continue to test and measure, right? And at the end of the day, we can really, again, understand, key things like how much, especially when I'm doing like new member acquisition or new event registration acquisition. I might have a speaker do a free webinar, see if they want to come in and register for the conference, et cetera, things like that. I can start to get some measurements around how much, from, again, a little bit of a value exchange, how much did it cost us as the organization to be able to acquire that new name, okay? And we did it within the laws of compliance, and we didn't go and buy email lists or buy things like that, and we didn't kind of skirt the law. We did it organically. We have real people who are attracted to us, and we're able to understand what the cost involved in that, and it's all through a webinar, okay? the last kind of pieces of what makes webinar great is that it allows you to really understand where you are in the buyer's journey. And if you think of the buyer's journey in terms, many times it's spoken from the standpoint of a funnel, where at the very top of it, you've got all these, again, anonymous people that you don't know. And over the course of being able to engage with them digitally in this value exchange, I'm able to continue to narrow down to the very bottom of the funnel, where people actually, in the bottom of the funnel is usually when they make a purchase. All right, that's typically how it's considered. But for you, it might be, in the bottom of your funnel might be when they converted and decided to register for the webinar. But the point being is you're trying to put them through some sort of process and be able to disseminate who are the people that are the most interested in whatever particular point you're trying to get for. You're trying to test, right? And that's why marketing, one of the areas where marketing and communications very much differ is marketing is a social science, and it's based on a lot of scientific hypothesis and test and try again. And what you're looking for here is, if I have a hypothesis that at the very bottom, that if I put out this topic at the very top, I'm going to attract new people, and that if I then put them into a workflow and nurture them through this funnel, that out the bottom, I'll get 10% of them will convert to being an event registration attendee, something like that. So you can use webinars to be able to understand where they are and how close are they to buying. That's one of the key pieces of webinars. And I can do that because, remember, just like deciding what type of wine I want to put out or cheese for my taste testing, I can do the same thing. The webinar itself, again, is kind of like my petri dish. I can decide what topic I want to put out to find out where they might be in the buyer's journey. So, for example, I might put out a topic that's like, getting to know marketing automation. And it's like the very beginning. I'm not really aware what the topic is. I'm new to it. I'm trying to just understand, get a landscape kind of analysis of what is this thing that people are talking about. And that might be the very, very top. They're not ready to buy something. Maybe I'm selling marketing automation software. They're not ready to buy yet. They don't even know. Why would they buy? They don't even know what they're talking. They don't even know. They have no context of what they'd be shopping for. They have no way of doing that. Today's world, 70% of that decision is going to be made by doing online searches and doing my own research and talking to peers. I could put out a topic that's something about applying topical knowledge. So I might say, hey, best practices or how to build a landing page in 5 steps or less. Well, that's telling me I'm already working with people. I'm already going to talk to people who, 1, know the topic at hand. 2, they're already at least doing something practical with it and have some sense of it, right? So now we're farther down the funnel. I'm understanding where they fit in the continuum of a particular subject matter or topic, right? And I can play with that, and then I can get down to other things like, I can really look at comparisons between, okay, I'm thinking about litigating, and I can either go with this principle or this principle. Let's say, if, I'm doing legal education. Okay, well, that person who's going to attend that webinar is pretty far down the path. I mean, they might be something where it's like, well, you know what? If you came to our conference, we have an entire panel selection talking about the pros and cons of doing just that. Are you in? Right? I'm much closer probably to purchase in that example. So point being, a webinar or a webinar series allows me to put out topics and kind of do a test, a sense and respond to figure out where people might be. And I can then say, well, I'm trying to attract more people at the top of the funnel, right? I want to get more people. I need more members into my particular association industry topic, and people just don't even know about it. So I need to do something very broad and get people at the very top knowing it's going to take a good amount of time to cultivate them through. Versus I've got a really hot topic that can be a quick win. I'm going to go right to maybe the bottom of the funnel. But my webinar and my ability to have a webinar allows me to do that placement right along the funnel and try to see how many people can I get at kind of different layers and how fast they flow through the funnel. How fast they can go through there. So if I have something at the bottom of the funnel, can I convert them very quickly? And I know within whatever it might be, 90 days that they'll become a customer. Versus they're at the very top of awareness. How long does it take for someone to go from being aware that maybe they're just graduating college in a particular industry? How long does it take them to becoming aware that there's an association for that, right? To go from there to actually joining an association, right? And we can start to then devise campaigns to help to move them through that funnel faster, or figure out ways that we can get in front of them to attract those people to put them into the funnel. But ultimately, remember, it's a funnel. We're trying to filter out and just get down to the people who really are seriously interested and have all the kind of attributes of what we would want in a customer, member, etc. And in our world today, that's a two-way street, right? So that idea of funnels is used all over the place. I mean, it's used for, trying to find new employees, to buying a new product, to, where you are in your different life cycles and things like that. So it's very applicable, but it is a mental model that's very different. That's a quality play versus a quantity play. Okay, we're not trying to capture everyone. It's a little bit different. And the last kind of piece here that makes webinars very hot today is it gives you a natural point to follow up on, right? So hopefully people aren't cold calling anymore and just like buying lists and like, hey, do you want to join? Do you want to join? Do you want to come to our event? Even if you bought it from a, something that's, there's some amount of, you've selected by industry or SIC code or something like that. A webinar allows you to have a one step further in developing some sort of rapport that's personal. So again, now I can follow up and say, hey, look, you participated and joined our webinar on this topic. How do you want to get more, etc. And I have an entry point now that I can actually do a nurture campaign, and it's not going to be awkward. It's not going to be like I just got an email out of nowhere saying, hey, do you want to come to our conference for $1,400? And I'm like, no, I can't do that. I don't even know what organization you are, right? So I'm allowing to increase again my brand trust. I'm being able to build that rapport. This is the other side of the, kind of the taste before you buy. I'm able to now say, hey, look, you tasted, you came to the webinar, you heard our topics, you heard what we were talking about. Is this something that you want to pursue? Is there other ways? And I have an entry point that's natural, that's built on trust and is built on that value exchange for me to say, how can I be of more service to you, right? And then you tell me, user, when can I interact with you? What would be appropriate? How else can I be of service? That is a very different model than saying, how can I sell more to you, right? Very different. And so that nurture point of allowing the user to adopt into you is the fundamental reason why you don't send emails anymore and on every email say, do you want to join today? Right? I get that question all the time. And we got to nurture them a little bit more into that so that we have, again, the webinar gave us an entry point to bond together for trust, and now we need to build on it. Okay? And so we're going to nurture that through, and those are called nurture campaigns. But a webinar is a perfect way to give us that opportunity to do it in a really genteel, elegant fashion and allow everybody to say, you know what, I'm just not interested right now. No problem. Would you want us to come back to you later? Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. Now I have lots of information about what's appropriate. Okay, and a webinar is just great for that. All right, so just to beat metrics more into all of our heads. So again, other metrics that come from webinars, and even the more webinars you have and the more people that attend them, you start to really complete or create a very complete profile. So typical metrics, and that almost doesn't matter, what platform. Again, nowadays it's there's so much good software out there. The tools are important, but the know-how is more so. So the typical metrics that you can get out of most good webinar platforms are all the kinds of things that you would think about registration. Dates registered, time registered, IP address many times, the price they paid, of course, things like that. But if it's a good webinar system and it's cooked into your marketing automation, it could be scraping their whole social profile. You know how many Twitter followers they have, if they're on Facebook, all sorts of additional things, because I legally, if you will, got that email address, I can append all sorts of other data on there to help complete even a better profile. I can find out usually what campaign it came from. So I might have said for this particular webinar, this is going to be for a campaign called, you know, biophysics. And then I'm going to put this biophysics campaign, and I'm going to use Twitter and Facebook and email to promote. Then when I get the registration, I know exactly from which source that person registered. That's super helpful in understanding my spend, okay? I can understand how engaged they are with my materials. When did they log in? Were they 5 minutes late? Were they 5 minutes early? When did they leave? Did they come in and out? Did they pop in and out, right? Did they interact? Did I put up polls and they interacted with them? All of those things, I have a sense of the good systems capture all of those metrics, right? And again, I can always have those follow-up pieces on email, etc. So I have so many touch points just within one webinar because it is kind of a complete campaign that it's a great one to use to really start to study and to use for lead generation, especially when I'm trying to find out, is this, I think it's a good target market, I think we can get some new business here, but how do I really test it? Webinars are a very good, low risk, low cost go-to-market technique. Okay, so we're gonna have a webinar, right? Couple of ideas for promoting. When I think about webinars and I'm thinking about associations, I immediately say, who should we email? But what if we don't want to, we can't email people we don't know. We don't have their email address. That's why we're putting on the webinar. We might want to start with a company who says, we'll give you the software and we'll do a, you know, rev share on anybody who registers. So you don't even have to invest in the software. That exists. But I might want to say, how do I get people who don't know me to come to the webinar? How do I use it truly for lead gen? And of course, the answer is we got to put it out there in the public sector. So we're trying to go from public to in front of anonymous people who we think are going to be who we are trying to target and try to get them to convert into known visitors who gave me their email address in my value exchange. So typically we can do a whole sort of ways of you know, combination of promoting our webinars. Might be paid advertising, might be using paid ads within LinkedIn, Google AdWords, you know, Bing. I might be buying banners on other people's sites. I might be putting banners within my own newsletters, within my employees' staff signatures. I might have stuff over on an affiliate site. I could be buying, you know, investing in Twitter cards or Facebook ads. So any sort of combination, ad roll, combination of paid advertising to help say, hey, here's a free webinar. And what's great about paid advertising and free webinars is that, again, it's getting in front of perhaps a lot of people, and a lot of these you can, one, control the cost and super target. You're getting in front of people you don't know, and you're offering something that's very palatable to them, a free webinar on a topic that is of interest. So again, they're voluntarily really saying, I'm interested. I certainly can utilize any of my social media channels, getting really good at understanding, you know, what hashtag or what community I can get in front of to talk about my free webinar. And most people are not upset when you are marketing something that's a thought leadership piece, right? You're not saying, hey, come join my association. You're saying, hey, we're having a webinar on this topic, right? There's a lot of organizations who will, you know, bundle that in for you and send it out. There's a lot of aggregators and such data. They're happy, they love webinar offers because it gives them something for them to market, okay? And it's kind of seen as like a public service, if you will. Certainly you want to be able to use search engine optimization. And also webinars might be, now here's when it does make sense. You might want to buy a direct mail list and do some direct mail to get it in front of people who didn't even know you existed, right? We can still do that one. That might make sense. So there's a lot of organizations, well, not a lot, but there are some organizations who actually will do postcard campaigns. American Marketing Association does this. They'll do postcard campaigns to get you into a webinar series as a way to pull you through, okay? And there's also, again, using your affiliates and asking your other partners, et cetera, to help you with the marketing of it. And usually good partners, again, usually there's no skin off their back, especially if you have a good brand, they're a good brand. You're just trying to bring some good thought leadership out there. So again, it's something that is seen as kind of a good. It's seen as kind of a industry good to be able to market a true webinar. Now you can't go in there and do kind of, you know, it's got to be real education. But you know, people they'll vote with their feet if it's not. So those are kind of some ways, and I point that out because most organizations still don't have a very developed paid advertising plan or a social media campaign, or know how to bundle it in with kind of some of their traditional, direct mail, etc. So a couple things to just think about that. And then I wanted to finish up with our top of the hour of our quick success story. This is Construction Financial Management Association. We work with them in a variety of different ways. We brought them from email to marketing automation and got them enabled from a sales enablement standpoint. All of their marketing was consolidated on it, and they went from having basically email open rate and click-through to having these, again, comprehensive profiles of their members and also prospective members, customers, etc. So I picked them out in particular because I think they do everything right when it comes to webinars. They're such a great case study. They use Digitel as their platform to run all of their webinar programs. And we partner with those guys as well, and that's great because we can have the data and it works right within the marketing automation program. So we have it all again. Whole idea is amassing the most comprehensive profile possible. But a couple things that CFMA does that's really nice. One, they have free webinars. They have paid webinars, but they have free webinars. They understand that certain webinars they're using for lead generation. They're trying to use it to pull people into that funnel. They have both live webinars, which saying, hey, come in and register and show up on Tuesday, April 16th at 2 p.m., as well as they package them all up and they have them all available for on-demand. It's amazing to me how many organizations still don't have that. I'm sure there are good reasons, but it's something to think about. Having that on-demand content is something that continuously builds leads or can generate leads for you 365 days a year, all around the clock. So on-demand, they do both of those and they use them for lead gen. I believe that I think they have something they do with their pricing for difference between live and on-demand, and so they create some demand for the live, if you will. They have packages, they have different bundles, they have different ways that they do discounted bundles. Even in the display of how they're marketing their webinars, they allow the user different ways to browse to find out what they want. So I can look at based on time, upcoming webinars, right? I can see based on format. Is it on demand or is it live because it's an upcoming event? And I can also browse by topic, okay? That's great. You know what I can also do? I have all the metrics on my particular website here. So all the people that are browsing on a particular topic, right, helps me to already start formulating who are other offers that I can provide to them in that kind of workflow and nurturing program. And they also, again, use discounts like we were talking about as appropriate. The last piece that I love about them and has worked so well for them from a lead gen perspective is how they do some of their affiliate marketing. And here's what they do. It's like no skin off their back. They said, look, we don't want to compete with all the other associations that are in our neck of the woods, right? We're this particular niche. Talk about knowing your brand and having confidence. We fulfill construction financial management, okay, which is a very specific niche. But there's a whole lot of associations that are in the construction industry. Why not partner with them and say, hey, if you're partnered with us, we're going to give you a promotion code, and if you come to one of our webinars, we'll give you 40% off. 40% off. This has allowed them to grow so much from a base of who they want to filter out. And so now they have all these people coming in. Again, they're filling the funnel. And then I can help to narrow down based on title, based on who they are. Who should I go after from the standpoint of who's the right people in finance, right? Who are the right titles that I want to actually be able to go out and target? Really great example of how to do it right. So again, just in wrapping up, everything we talked about today, all the elements of webinars that make them so great, the metrics, the ability to get in front of people we don't know, the ability to use topics to understand where people are on the buyer's journey, and probably more importantly, to use it from a taste testing standpoint to get the right people attracted and coming and voluntarily choosing us to get us into that dialogue so we can nurture the relationship. And those are the reasons that in 2017, webinars are so incredibly hot. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you at our next HighRoad U, and everybody do good work.